Hello and welcome to the next Lukozer retro game review video, and for this one it is Deathrace 64, which was released by Atlantis in 1987. Keep that in mind throughout this review. Now this game is basically a conversion of the Sega arcade coin-op game Turbo, which is a game that first appeared in 1981. So 6 years after that game came along, finally this thing shows up. If that's not ridiculous enough, yesterday I found out, purely because I mentioned this game to Gan's Teeth, that there was a VIC-20 version of this game. The VIC-20 version was released in 1984, so for it to take another 3 years after the VIC-20 release for the Commodore 64 version to come along, you would think they must have done a lot of work to this in order to make it, you know, really good. Make it as good as it possibly can be. But like I say, this is essentially a conversion of a racing game that first appeared in 1981. And while there were plenty of great arcade coin-op games in 80 and 81, none of them were particularly sophisticated. So let's get a game underway then, and yeah, let's just get a game underway. There we go. We are the yellow car. I was doing alright then. You only get 3 lives, as far as I can remember. This is it. This is the whole fucking thing. Now, I suppose if I was feeling generous, I would point out that it certainly runs at a fair old speed. Indeed, I think that's my last life. Yep. The original Turbo game was also particularly well known for its speed. I mean, given that it was a 1981 game, it was extremely fast. But let's cut to the chase. This is a 1987 release. This is at the very peak of the Commodore 64's popularity. Games that were being released around this time were, I mean, immensely sophisticated, whether it be in terms of audio, video, gameplay. I mean, around this sort of time we had games like Whizball, Hunter's Moon, no, Citadel hadn't been released by this time, but obviously Impossible Mission, that had been around for 3 years by the time this came along. And then suddenly, in 87, they think it's a great time to release this. I look at it, for fuck's sake. And the buildings on the side there, when you're driving past them, clearly, you can clearly see that the buildings don't actually move. You're not actually driving past them. It's just that the colours within them have changed to give the impression that they're moving. which is an almighty cop-out. Now, okay, in the arcade original, that might have been necessary, but it fucking isn't necessary on a Commodore 64 in 1987. That's that game over. One go will last at the most 80 seconds, because you have 80 seconds in which to pass as many cars as possible. You can see at the top there, after score time, and it starts at 80, and then you have your lives, and then you have your speed. I mean, at some point, yeah, here we go. So I'm supposedly doing 300 mile an hour. Now, yeah, okay, I am going pretty fast, especially when you compare this to shit like, you know, Enduro Racer and Super Hang On and Chase HQ. But, I mean, I'm not doing 300 mile an hour. There's no sense that I'm going that fucking fast. There is a sense of speed, yes, but fucking hell. There's also a sense of very dodgy collision detection, because I'm sure I missed that car. I don't know why I keep entering my name. I think it's purely because it actually has the novelty of being able to use the keyboard to enter your name. It's hard to imagine. Oh, at last, you know, 1987, so 5 years after the Commodore 64 was first released to the market, we finally get a game where you can use the keyboard to enter your name in. So it does have that going for it. And I mean, if you've watched my videos at any time, you know that I am a big fan of old school gaming. You know, no matter what the game type is, whether it's shoot 'em up, whether it's a racing game, whether it's an adventure game or whatever. For me, old school is the best. But you know, I do freely admit that old school gaming does have its limitations. And in 1987, releasing a racing game that is this fucking simple, because the road is a completely straight line from start to finish. The only challenge is, you know, making sure you're on the correct part of the straight as the cars, you know, get closer that you're about to overtake. I mean, otherwise you can fuck it up right away like I did just then. Oh, fucking what? This is a seriously shit go. Oh, fucking hell, I barely fucking moved there, so that go was over in 14 seconds. Fuck off, I'm not putting my name on that. So, alright, graphically the game is fucking shite. In terms of audio, I mean, there really isn't much here. There's no music at all. The sound effects are unbelievably basic and bland, a bit like everything else in the game. And the gameplay, you can tell that it's essentially a conversion of a 1981 game. So, I mean, it is so overly simple. There are no bends, no corners in the road at all. It is fucking gun barrel straight from the moment you start. It's just a case of you know, putting yourself in the right part of the road to pass the cars as they you know, rocket past you, and that's it. So and the ridiculous thing is, I mean, this came out in 1987. That's the part I just cannot get over. I mean, I've not seen the VIC-20 version, and I'm really hoping that Ganseef does do a review of the VIC-20 version, because I'd like to see how the two compare. But I cannot believe that the VIC-20 version isn't at least identical to this, because it is so simple. There's no reason why VIC-20 couldn't fucking do this game easily. I mean, the Commodore 64 could probably render this game, you know, while on fucking standby. It's just nothing here. So yeah, shockingly, I'm not a fan. So I score the game 2 out of 10. Frankly, I think I may have overrated it by scoring it 2 out of 10. If this game, you know, if this was a VIC-20 game that I was playing here, I might be somewhat impressed. But it's not. It's a Commodore 64 game, which means I'm not impressed at all. So there you go, Deathrace 64 from Atlantis, released in 1987, and yet this is what it's like. 2 out of 10. It's fucking bollocks is what it is. So that brings this review to an end, and we'll see you at the next one.